Welcome back, everyone. So we're cleaned up for Passover, right? So here's what's next. We have to make sure we have everything ready for the Seder. The Seder is really the highlight, the feature of Passover, and in it we recall the Exodus from Egypt, the journey, and where we are. And there are some families who want to do a 6-minute Seder, and there are others who want to do the Seder as if they're leaving Egypt in real time. So it takes them 3 months, 4 months to complete the Seder. I'm kidding, of course. There are people who talk about the Seder, talk about the Exodus from Egypt all night. So I'm going to try and address all of these with my remarks today. So the first thing we need, regardless of how you're timing your Seder, is the Seder plate. The Seder plate contains all the things, all the symbolic foods that are necessary for the Passover Seder. We'll begin with marar, the bitter herbs. Many people use horseradish for this, but actually horseradish isn't bitter. It's hot. People tend to use, or what we should be using is something bitter, like a bitter green, like romaine lettuce or endive or escarole or something like that has a bitter aftertaste to it. But we also do have horseradish on the Seder plate. But we have the marar, the chazeret that you'll see on the Seder plate. That's the horseradish, a white horseradish or even fresh horseradish that's been ground up. The next, charoset. Charoset is a mixture, depending on where you're from, is what is in the mixture. If you're an Ashkenazic Jew, then it's generally chopped apples, walnuts, wine, and cinnamon. Amongst the Sephardic community, raisins, dates, also some nuts, and charoset is used during the Seder to make the marar more palatable. The karpas, the next, is the vegetable of choice. So generally, we should be using a green vegetable, and some people use parsley or something like that they can dip in the salt water. Many people use potatoes, and there's a reason for this. In many of the communities in Eastern Europe who were very poor, they couldn't afford greens. So the blessing for parsley and the blessing for potatoes is the same blessing, which ends in Borei Pri Ha'adama, who brings forth fruit from the earth. And so we can use either. So depending on your family tradition, it's potatoes or some sort of greens that are dipped in the salt water. So that's the karpas that's on the Seder plate. Next is a beitzah, egg. The egg represents renewal. It represents the holiday offering, the chagiga offering that was on the that was generally given during the time that the temple was in existence. And then you have the zroa, the shank bone, which represents the idea of God's outstretched arm, his mighty hand and an outstretched arm with which he redeemed the Jewish people from Egyptian slavery. There is a response that for those who are vegetarians, you may use a roasted beet for the zroa. And that's found in the Talmud tractate on Passover called Pesachim. Pesach, Pesachim. So those are the items that are to be found on the Seder plate. In addition, we have wine or grape juice. There should be enough for 4 cups for each person. There's also a an extra cup. It's called Elijah's cup, which contains grape juice or wine. And that's used to represent sort of two ideas. One, a command that we read in the book of Kings, where Elijah the prophet was commanded to visit every Passover Seder because he felt that the Jewish people had stopped observing the commandments and they were worshiping idols. And so we have a cup for Elijah. But I will tell you, I hate to disappoint everybody, but the real reason we have a fifth cup is because the sages could not decide whether we're supposed to drink 4 or 5 cups. And the argument in the Talmud went back and forth, and they couldn't come to a final decision. So we have a fifth cup available, but we don't make a blessing over it. And we'll know when Elijah comes. That's the Talmud's way of saying when the Messiah, when Mashiach comes, we'll know the answer to that question, whether it's 4 or 5. So in order to not make a blessing in vain, violation of the second commandment, in order not to make a blessing in vain, we have a fifth cup available, but we don't drink it and don't make a blessing over it. The next item we must have is matzah. And here's where people are a little bit divided. Can you buy the box of matzah and use the box of matzah for the Seder, or do you need something called shmura matzah? So the joke about shmura matzah is you buy this matzah, you make sure you remove it carefully from the box, and then you eat the box because it's more tasty. However, I have found, and if you want to contact me at a different time, I have found shmura matzah, or matzah that is carefully watched and observed and made sure it's kosher for Passover, that I can tell you some that are pretty tasty. What if you are gluten intolerant in many of its forms? Well, instead of having wheat matzah, you are permitted to have either oat matzah, spelt matzah, rye matzah. Those are other matzot. Those are other matzahs that are baked that contain no gluten. So you can still fulfill the mitzvah, the commandment of eating matzah, without injuring your stomach. Salt water. This is an essential component of the Passover Seder. It represents the tears of slavery. And we dip vegetable in the salt water, and that is really the most important idea behind the salt water. How salty should you make it? Well, again, that's depending on your taste. My brother makes salt water that would rival the content of the Dead Sea. So, I mean, literally the vegetables float on it when he makes it. So it depends on how salty you want it. And that's the Seder plate, and those are the ritual items that we have for the Seder. One of the most important parts of the process is choosing a Haggadah that works for you and your family. So there are many, many, many traditional Haggadah books that you can use. They contain every possible explanation of every ritual and every blessing that we have. So we're just about ready to get started on our Seder. We have all the items ready to use, and in our next session we will go through the Seder, all parts of the Seder, and give you a brief description of each one. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.